In any event, I'm Melinda Wolf, chair of the board of ZanaAfrica, and I'm so happy to welcome you here tonight on behalf of our other board members, Chief Nawaji and Dwayne Cranston. I'm pleased to welcome you to what I think will be a wonderful evening, and already has started that way. Thank you for being here, and to SAP for opening this really fabulous space. And just to be super inspired by SAP, they created this space to foster innovation with purpose and to facilitate conversation in support of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So that's quite a corporate commitment, and thank you so much for offering this to us. It really makes a difference to be in such a beautiful place.
Thank you very much.
So I'm here tonight for two major reasons. One is connection, and the other is commitment. Several years ago, a cherished friend and philanthropic advocate, Kathy LeMay, whom you'll hear from more just shortly, encouraged me to meet a woman to watch, and that was Megan Curia and her fabulous organization, ZanaAfrica. It was through Kathy that I connected to Megan and to the incredible work she has dedicated her life to doing across Kenya to advance the lives of girls and champion the agenda for menstrual health management and equity. Through very simple, practical solutions and effective education, the work of Megan and her team have increased the likelihood that girls will stay in school by 75%, and along with that, claim their bodies and their agency. So compelling were Megan, her team, and their cause that many of us, from individuals to foundations, have committed their time, treasure, and talent to deepen and broaden the impact of ZanaAfrica. And that's why we're here tonight, in particular, to celebrate the organization's anniversary, 10 years of groundbreaking work. And in the next hour, you'll hear Kathy, Megan, and our outstanding panelists, thought leaders and practitioners in the menstrual health and equity movement. So, let's get to it. I'm pleased to introduce our inspiring and provocative moderator, Kathy LeMay, who is president of Raising Change, Inc., an online fundraising masterclass that aims to transform global social change fundraising. Kathy is also the interim executive director of Women Moving Millions, the world's largest philanthropic organization dedicated to equipping female philanthropists to advance gender equity. So take it away, Kathy.
So before me, and just to warm up to this extraordinary woman, would you come?
Yeah, absolutely. You see the mic?
Yeah.
I see the mic here. Okay. So we're fine. Okay, is it? Okay. So, first of all, a very warm welcome to Hudson Yard. How many of you have been to Hudson Yard before? Colored people. How many have been to 48th floor before? Okay. So this is actually a floor. We've been open for 1 year, and we, as mentioned, is totally dedicated to innovation with purpose. And I actually have a double role. I'm Senior Vice President and running a global innovation network with 3,400 universities around the world. And we actually have a number of universities in Kenya. We are in 130 countries where we work with schools and universities for the STEM education. But in addition to that, why this evening here is very special for me that this is taking place is that I'm global responsible for UN Women for She Innovate. So when you came in the interest, there was a wall with UN Women sign on, and this is called She Innovate. And She Innovate is actually about getting a women a voice when we speak about innovation. That's STEM education, that is women and entrepreneurship. Actually, on the other side of the space here, we actually have a women accelerator where we have 10 women sitting and working on business-to-business applications. It is investment for women startups. So we work with the whole topic about education, but also really big focus on women. So this event for me, and there's kind of two reasons how you can use this space or allowed to come into this space, is that it needs to be about innovation and innovation with purpose. You can't do innovation, that's not good enough. It needs to be innovation with purpose. That's why you see all this global goal thing is not just for tonight. This is what you see every single day. So we kind of enforce this conversation. If you look at things about women, and it really go for what this event is about tonight, it's about giving them the right environment and support, no matter where they are in the world. I'm from a country called Denmark, and in Denmark, education is a right for every single person. Healthcare is a right for every single person. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor or nothing like that. It's a right, and that's why this is something that I got to know based on my global job, that this is not something you can just expect from where you are in the world. So therefore, as much as I can dedicate my life, I'm dedicating my life to make sure that education and healthcare is a right for every single person, and we do that very, very strongly around the world. So enjoy the evening. I can feel the aircon is on. Enjoy the evening. I'm happy that the weather is improved, so you can enjoy the view. I would love to stay, but I do have another thing I need to head out to. So enjoy, the evening is yours, and this space is yours, as long as you talk about innovation with purpose. You're welcome to be here, so enjoy.
So good evening, everyone. I'm Kathy LeMay, and I'm getting way more love than that. Good evening. Good evening. I was walking around the room, I'm so warm, and I thought, this is what it means to be a perimenopausal lady. I'm so warm. And so they were still the AC's not on. I'm still good. The theme of the evening, it felt okay to talk about perimenopause. I am so unbelievably happy to be here. I do not think I would want to be anywhere else than here right now. And I have the absolute privilege of introducing you to this panel of women who make me think they are who I can be one day when I grow up. And so I'm going to start all the way on land and have you say hello to Marnie Summers. And Marnie is, and so I'm going to read from my notes, and if you could realize how much I need glasses, I've written in large font with a very big Sharpie so that I can enjoy glasses. And Marnie is the Associate Professor at the Mailman School of Public Health at Columbia. She is the founder of Grow and Know, which are puberty books for boys and girls that are given to the poorest countries in the world. So she both is a professor and a nonprofit leader and a renowned researcher, and has dedicated so much of her life to menstrual health and the empowerment of girls and boys, and so everyone welcome Marnie. To her with about the coolest necklace I've ever seen in my life is Gerda Larson. Gerda is the co-founder and managing director of the Case for Her Foundation, and this foundation has an investment portfolio, and their portfolio is right now the largest portfolio in the world, investing in menstrual health throughout the globe. Part of their goal and their purpose is to invite other people who have investment portfolios to do the same. They're truly making a mark and raising the bar for other investment portfolios throughout the world, which is never an easy thing to do. Whenever you put yourself out there and everyone says that idea is never going to fly, and then it soars. And so that is what Gerda and her wonderful team does. I'm lucky enough to be the interim executive director of a group called Women Moving Millions. Two of the people who fund the work behind the Case for Her are members of Women Moving Millions, and so I'm so lucky to get to know Gerda and her work. She has also been at UN Women at the board at Giving Wings, and once upon a time did real estate, and aren't we so lucky that she's entering social change. Welcome, Gerda. Oh my goodness. So many years ago, 11, 12 years ago, I was in the middle of nowhere in Camden, Maine, for reasons that are clear to me. And I went to speak at this conference that seemed so remote and isolated and literally nowhere in New England. And I gave a presentation on how do you raise money for social innovation. And a lot of people weren't even talking about it. And I give a lot of speeches, and a lot of people come up to me afterwards. And Megan approached me and said, so I have spent my life and my heart leaving Greenwich, moving to Kenya, and working with street kids in Kenya, and I have realized the reason girls are not getting an education is when they get their period, when they enter puberty, there is no system in place to allow them to stay in school and go to school, and the implications on their lives are profound. And she said, I am going to start an organization that creates pads that are made locally and go to girls in rural Kenya. And I said, okay, this is wonderful. And she said, when I'm ready, I will call you. And 2 years later, I get an email and she said, do you remember me? And then we raised a whole ton of money together, and that was so much fun. And here we are 10 years later, and Megan has spent 20 years living in Kenya. And what Megan has done that I'm not sure all people have done, but we possibly should, is that she has radically listened to girls and said, how can I be your ally and supporter and create that which has not been yet given to you and probably should have been all along. So Megan is the founder of ZanaAfrica, and her work, which was an idea on a piece of paper, has now reached 30,000 girls throughout rural Kenya, and the truth is it's only just beginning, so would you please welcome Megan. And so I'm going to go all the way down, and I'm going to start with Marnie, who is our researcher. And Marnie, would you, because when people think, when you talk about women's periods and menstrual health, I've brought it up to people over the past decade, and some of what I've realized is it gets kind of siloed in this tiny box. And people say, oh, like malaria, or like this, and it gets boxed, and people will say, no, it's not really my issue. It's not really what I do. And what I have understood is maybe we haven't done the best job in the world of helping people understand what happens when a girl enters puberty. And Marnie's excellent work has been about what does the research tell us? What does the data show? And what do you want our friends here tonight to understand about the menstrual health movement around the world?
So thank you. It's an honor to be on this panel, to be here. I just can ask a quick question of the audience. How many women, men, in the room got their period at some point and there was no toilet anywhere nearby to sort of manage? And how many women in the room got their period at some point and didn't have a pad or a tampon or any other sort of mechanism for managing? Okay, well, the rest of you are very fortunate. And the last question I'd ask is how many in the room got your period the first time and didn't know what was happening to you? Okay, so that's really very sort of impactful of Megan and the work she's doing. I think what we have now learned, I've been doing this research since 2004, is that in countries around the world, unlike the limited number of people who raise their hand in this room, many girls have their first period and have no idea what's happening to them. They think they're dying, they think they have to go to the hospital, they think they have some terrible disease, which is not to suggest that it's all girls. There are plenty of girls who are supported, but I think what is so striking to me is the patterns, and I've been involved either directly or advising on research projects in 20 plus countries, is the universality of this sort of gap in information. And then related to that, many of them going to schools that have inadequate toilets or no toilets, toilets without doors. Can you managing your period on this floor if there was no door on the women's toilet or no lock, if you didn't have the supplies you need. And so we've just seen this in country after country. And I think that is where we are now is, okay, we know that this is the issue, we know this is significant, so how do we turn to solutions that are effective?
When you said that, I thought of my mom, who was born and raised in Finland, and told me when she was 9 years old, she was on a school bus and she got her period. And she said, I was bleeding so much, I thought, okay, I'm actually dying and I don't get to say goodbye to my parents. And so I remember I can't really young, like criminally young, and she put a copy of Little Women and Our Bodies Ourselves right in front of me. Go, Mom, okay. And Gerda, would you share about your foundation, which is unique in the world right now of foundations and people who have investment portfolios? What first brought you to thinking there is an opportunity around supporting menstrual health, and it's not a problem to solve, but it legitimately is an opportunity? How did you come to that?
I mean, so first of all, I must say that I have my dream job getting to work on this, and as Megan, I'm sure, can vouch for, it's easier to be a founder than someone looking for funding. So, yeah. That's always a privilege. So, I mean, I'm from Sweden and born and raised in Stockholm. I had access to a toilet, I had access to a pad, I had access to a tampon, but still, I had no idea. I mean, I went out, my mom was out in the garden, I went out to her and I said, I think I got my period, because yeah, I thought so, but I did not know how it should look. And she says, well, just go to the bathroom and, you know, in the lower cupboard, you have all the stuff you need. And I went in and I opened it and I was like, okay, so what's next? And for those who are girls here and tampon users, I did insert a tampon, not as far in as it should go, and I sat down and there was excruciating pain. And I mean, I had access to school education, I had access to healthcare, as my Danish neighbor just said, we have access to all of these things. But it was hard for me too. And I mean, then what's the situation for girls? So I ran into these two fantastic women, Wendy and Christina, about 5 years ago, and we started piloting to financing menstrual health. We have today piloted around 14 projects, or we actually do non-profit, but we also do for-profit financing. So we do convertible debt, equity investments, and grant funding, which we now done mostly in East Africa. We also do it in South Asia, but we see the need, and we also have investments in both Germany and the States. So, I mean, what we do, shortly, I could say, is just that we try to fund the most grossly overseen, the most unfunded, one of the most tabooed issues in the world, because it's needed, and there's, unfortunately, too few of us funding it.
Thank you. Megan, when did you know, in Kenya doing the work that you did, when did you know that this was a critical inflection point to fund and support? Many people I've met over the years have said, oh no, I can't touch it. What had you in your work with street girls say, this might be where we can create a shift and make a difference?
Great question. Well, since 1998, when I first went to Kenya, I had a realization that I wanted to help unlock the most opportunity for the most girls. And that led me to come back to Kenya and work with street children for 5 years. And thanks to my mother and father for letting me do that. When I started, I was actually creating a budget for the organization. And I found out that sanitary pads were our second biggest cost every month after bread. Now, how many of us actually even bother to think about pads or tampons when we're throwing them into our shopping carts? It's not even an option. But I was realizing that families had to choose, we were having to choose between food and sanitary pads. And so that was kind of this finance moment of like, gosh, this is an opportunity to create self-sustainability for that organization and to solve a key problem of access and affordability. And then combined with that, all these girls that I was helping to raise, and I was a foster mom of 2 girls myself, as well as helping to raise about 250 kids, they had questions. Like, we all have questions during puberty, but they were told, don't think about that. Just focus on school, don't think about boys. And it was basically a taboo subject, even to talk about health education, simply providing answers to girls' questions. And so I thought, I kind of promised myself and these girls, I will answer whatever questions you throw at me, even if it makes me uncomfortable, because you deserve honest answers. And then I thought, how can I combine this with pads to essentially act as kind of a mom or a safe auntie at scale to girls that can't come to me at 8 o'clock at night or 4 o'clock in the afternoon and ask me that secret question, so that we could provide that support for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions. And that combination was just this aha, and that was 2002, 2003, 2004, when nobody was even talking about it, and much less funding it. So we didn't actually get our first funding until April 2011. Yeah.
What's the biggest change you've seen since April 2011, both in your organization and in the landscape that is willing to now look at this as a critical public health issue and an economic issue and a thrivability issue.
Well, first we have like an ecosystem. It's amazing to be connected to researchers like Marnie and philanthropists and investors like Gerda and her team. And at the end of this month, UNFPA is having a conference for 200 to 300 people across the continent in Johannesburg to talk about menstrual health. And I've spent a lot of my time investing in folks like the Gates Foundation and Grand Challenges Canada, which is the global health arm of the Canadian government, to help them understand the interconnectivity between menstrual health and all of these other reproductive health issues, that those dots just weren't being connected. So I think one is just that I'm no longer just alone, and there are so many other players that we're all coming up around kind of the same time and starting to talk to each other. So I think globally, you all had an amazing conference that one of our staff attended, like just mapping a theory of change for menstrual health in East Africa, and brought together huge diversity of organizations to do that. I didn't have anything to do with that. You guys, like the fact that there's menstrual health stuff happening, it's building this amazing momentum. I think internally, it's been 10 years, which is amazing. And initially when I was talking to people saying, I want to make pads, I want to deliver health education through comics and a magazine type format, and in the pad package and along the pad package, and everybody kind of looked at me a little blank. It was like, come back to us when you do that. And now, like, if you look at your seats, hopefully this might be the first time you've ever gotten pads when you come to an event. This is our sanitary pad, Nia. She's the first African woman on a pad package. Nia means purpose in Swahili. Girls say it makes me feel like the whole world loves me. And they say it makes me feel proud to be a girl. And through forging partnerships with folks like Marie Stopes and Planned Parenthood and a bunch of other really great gender-based violence recovery centers and free HIV testing and things like that, by the end of this year, we're going to have the pad itself have content on it that can direct girls to free resources, whether they want to talk to somebody, they want to text message and find a clinic. We're going to start branding safe spaces for girls to go. But it's there, like it's really there. We have 9 patentable pulps that we could use to make our own pads. It's a $19 billion industry, just by the way. This isn't a small industry, and the fact that it's kind of overlooked is kind of stunning to me. So we have that, the magazines that we've actually created go through comprehensive sexuality education in a referable, fun way. And we developed the curriculum that it pairs with through Population Council. And they so love their curriculum, our curriculum that has more gender-based violence issues and more social norms, that they're retweaking their curriculum to add that. So we're making all these exciting changes and really seeing girls' lives changed. And not just in the individuals, but now, I think, Alice, we've served 48,000 total to date, about 20,000 alone through the market. So it's really actually thrived. I no longer have high school graduates who used to be street children sitting around helping me run the organization. We now have 28 professional staff members. So it's just been a stunning journey.
It's been extraordinary, that the conversation about a pad, and I remember being in Kenya with Megan and talking to women who said, I've never seen an image of me on a package. It's white, Western women. And this sense of agency and identity. And so how something like a pad that can seem like a siloed issue and seem very narrow is actually, it encompasses and embodies so much more around someone's identity and sense of self, and that has been extraordinary. I'm going to come back to Megan in a minute for some time we spent in a Maasai orphanage together and what I learned from listening to these girls, and how ZanaAfrica is just endlessly responding to the communities in which they serve. And I want to go to Marnie for a moment, because the balance of understanding the data, how big is this issue and challenge in front of us? What what do we all in the room need to know that you know that says, this is actually what's in front of us. This is extraordinary work in Kenya. Can you give us a little bit about the global landscape and what is the data telling us?
Sure. So I think one of the main things is, as Megan alluded to, there really hasn't been funding for many years to map out this evidence, and so we've managed to do what we can with what there is. And again, I love that there is a groundswell. I think it makes it easier when you know what's actually happening to know where the resources should go. So just as an example of what we know, and aside from now knowing in numerous countries, and frankly someone should be doing research in the US, because I think there's a lot of schools in low-income neighborhoods here where girls' needs probably are not being met. So this, while we're focusing on another part of the world, I'm not sure this is not more universal than we think. But if you look at, for example, the data around 10 to 14-year-olds. So one thing is we don't actually know the average age when girls are getting their period for the first time in a lot of countries because it's not collected. But we know there's something like 250,000 million girls in this, if you look at the sort of population data, 10 to 14-year-old age range. And I think we can guesstimate that girls are probably getting it in that window, except for those in, I know rural Kenya, we have some data coming in that they're not getting it till age 15. But if you just think, you know, this massive millions of girls are getting their period for the first time, and very good chance they don't know what's happening to their bodies. What we've seen consistently, although I haven't done research in the US, is that girls may find out something later. It's often inadequate, frankly here too, I think, but they often know nothing before that first period. Unless they get it really late. So we're talking about immense numbers of girls who may not know what's happening to them. The other piece of data that I think is interesting, and again is extrapolating, is that the UN a number of years ago looked at schools across the lowest income countries, or the least developed countries. And we know that in these schools, of around 50%, sometimes maybe 47, 48%, do not have adequate toilets and do not have water. And so what I say when I'm teaching classes at Columbia is I have my students raise their hand. How many of you would walk an hour or walk half an hour and sit in these classrooms for 8 hours a day straight if there was nowhere, frankly for the female teachers as well, to manage if there was no adequate toilet, no adequate water facilities. So I think just those two little pieces, both the numbers and the significant gap in access to facilities, sort of paints the picture.
And Gerda, the case for her foundation and your work, why did you all gravitate to this issue when we look at the global landscape? What was it about menstrual health that had you all a case for her say, we have to focus on this outside of the others were not? What had you say it is a top priority?
Well, I think that there's actually several reasons why we made it a top priority. I think me, Wendy, and Christina, we all have our individual story of how we started this. But really, it's realizing how important menstruation is, both for girls to actually own and respect their own bodies, but also it's such a good starting point. When you start speaking about menstruation with someone, it's kind of close to start speaking about sex. When you speak about sex, you can speak about contraceptives, and we can speak about giving birth, postpartum bleeding, miscarriage, all the things up to menopause and beyond. And actually, as I told you before when we were mingling, we this year launched 2 new investment portfolios, and it's in menopause and female sexual pleasure. 2 other grossly underfunded areas, 2 taboos that has to do with the vagina, and that we never speak about. So, I mean, even the giggles here mentioning that word shows that, I mean, it's a global subject that we need to approach. So it's for girls in school, it's to keep women in the workforce, but it's also about yourself and as an individual. How do you really feel on the inside if something's going on and you think that you're sick when it's happening? I mean, we met girls that said this. We also heard about women when they enter menopause that says, I think I'm gonna die soon because all of this blood is not coming out and all of this poison is staying inside of me. So that's why we need education and reaching those girls.
And it's very unique when someone sees the opportunity, and she said the onset of puberty is an opportunity to talk to girls about their total lived experience. And that was a turning point, and then it was illustrated for me when I was with Megan, and we were at a Maasai orphanage at the base of Mount Kilimanjaro, and we were with all these lovely young girls, and I was sampling how you put on underwear and pads, and I'm pretty sure I put the pad on backwards. I just want to say that now. I shouldn't say that backwards. But the girls were so relieved that it was just happening in front of them and they could ask questions and talk about it. But what I remember Megan did that just struck me is she said, do you have any questions that you want to ask us? And she handed out index cards. And girls wrote all these questions and suddenly it clicked. This was the gateway. Because girls started to write on the cards, what do you do if a family member is hurting you and you don't know who else to talk to? And while it seems like this narrow silo, what Megan opened up for me is it's the beginning of these girls being able to say, there's other things happening in my life and I don't have anyone to talk to. Megan, will you talk a little bit more about that approach and what you've heard from girls and what ZanaAfrica has responded to that kind of goes beyond menstruation?
Absolutely. Well, just like our paths were forged from years of talking to women and girls about what they wanted in their perfect product. And I will bucket that by saying we also offer reusables. We also are starting to be offering cups with our amazing partner Lisa later this year because girls deserve dignity through choice. And so pads, we talk about pads because 98% of girls say that they want single-use sanitary pads, but we believe that they should be educated about all their options. And 4 in 5 girls and women really in East Africa don't have access to pads or health education. So we have asked questions all over the country on these little cards, and I'll read you some of the questions. They're similar. Anytime you get a group of 50 to 100 girls together, you get the same questions. And this is why menstrual health is so important, because it's the onset of your period marks, it's an indicator of health, right? It's not a sickness. It actually means that you're healthy. If you start not getting it, well, you're either pregnant or something's going on and you need to see a doctor. So we really try to break taboos by just celebrating periods and giving girls a space to ask this question. I think that that's what floors me the most, is just how it gives girls and women an excuse to talk about all of these things that they don't have a safe space to talk about. So we have questions, why does a person have a stomach ache when menstruating? Or what is a vaginal infection? They don't know what that is, or have itching and burning, what's going on? One of my kind of favorite, not favorite questions, why do boys neglect you once they know that you have their pregnancy? Right, obviously like getting pregnant and then the guy runs away. Right, funny, not funny. How do boys realize that you have menstruation? And so you get all these questions. You get questions about like, what if I don't like boys? You get questions, intersex questions. You get questions across the board. Is a teacher allowed to touch my breasts and my bottom? So it's not just about periods. It's about safety and it's about agency. Invariably, how do I not get pregnant, basically? But what we also found is 94% of girls' first sexual encounter is unwanted. It's forced, it's coerced. Girls are just really unsure and feel pressured. And the average age is 12, basically kind of around the onset of puberty. And so a girl does not feel like she's in the decision-making role in her own life around the most intimate, life-changing experience that she could have. And so this is really what we're doing, is saying, hey, here's how you don't get pregnant if you want to have sex. Here's how you say no. Here are some resources of safe people you can go to if you need to talk to somebody. Whether that's on a pad package and a free hotline, that the government hotline has a half an hour wait. So no girl who's borrowing somebody's phone is going to wait for half an hour to talk to somebody and report a rape or something, right? So we found a hotline through Marie Stopes that's about like 5 minutes wait maximum, right? So that's amazing. So we're trying to find those best resources and then package them for girls so that they can access it. The best volunteer testing and counseling for HIV has a WhatsApp group right? Because a lot of Kenyans are online and on WhatsApp, so they can text on WhatsApp a question. And so these are the ways in which we can see the landscape and create the best solutions to help girls and pair them with real life people. And that's where our foundation's work is so fundamental, with our very light touch curriculum that also has the 5 magazines. So without going into historical narratives, a lot of the problem right now is that the best of cultural rites of passage have been taken away. And you're not supposed to, as the parent, I mean, even here, you don't want to talk to your kids about menstruation, about sex, right? You're not supposed to. It's supposed to be the aunt, the uncle. And so because culture's been systematically disempowered, we are now being able to fill that gap by taking these best questions and putting them into this referable magazine format, which is kind of like its own rite of passage. You go through this whole information by yourself with a magazine alone, or with a safe person in 25 sessions over a year and a half. And for less than $100 a girl, we can get a girl anywhere in Kenya access to this safe mentor and this 2-year program, basically. And that's what's so powerful, is the scalability and we can measure and know the impact on health, education, and safety, down to even gender-based violence reporting.
And everyone says scalability, and I go, and then I know this is legitimately a scalable program. And I could spend a weekend talking to these women because how they have devoted and committed to this issue, and I know this is now Q&A time, so this is a chance to ask anything you want to ask them. And what I know is remembering sitting with Megan and sitting with a girl who just did not lose contact with my eyes for even a second the entire time I was there. She just held my eyes and held my eyes and held my eyes, and I thought, my goodness, this extraordinary young woman who has more courage on one day than I will have in a lifetime, is having this sense of I am being seen and realizing how much I have to actually offer. And what I appreciate so much about ZanaAfrica, again, is the sense that girls are this extraordinary, unrealized asset in the world. I certainly was as a girl, and the truth is most people around me didn't know it. And quite truthfully, shame on them for not understanding. And we just kept overcoming and overcoming. And when I think about the work that they're doing, I think of little pads with wings, sorry, but I think of a good friend of mine who once said, imagine how much women could achieve if we didn't have so much we had to get over. And my hope for this next generation of girls is they won't have to go through the things that most of us women in this room have had to go through. And so before I start the Q&A, can we just thank this panel? Oh, would you use your voices?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to ask Megan, the environmental center that we support in Kenya, the director very strongly believes that it's not just an issue of educating the young pubescent girls, but it's also a case of educating the boys. What you read on that?
Should we take a couple questions, or do you want me to answer one?
No, let's take two and we'll go from there. I think they're really here.
Yeah, I'm curious by what you said in terms of, this work, it's fabulous, it's happening in Kenya, but the need is obviously so much more pervasive than that. Are there other organizations and other work that's being done in other parts of the world, and specifically in the U.S.?
Question related to the first one to Lonnie, which is, do you teach classes, and if you do you find that you have men in your classes, and how much do you see in the campus environment men engaging in this issue?
So thank you, this was really wonderful. Two questions on that. One is, first, where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years, and how will you know when you get there, right? What's the vision, and how do you through knowledge and measurement. And the other thing is sort of follow-up with all, it's a little bit of the devil's advocate question, with all of the horrible issues that confront women in these countries, like life and death issues, malaria, water safety. How do you make the argument that this is where people should put their money and really care about the lives of communities in these parts of the country?
Sure. So I guess two, although I will just to speak to that issue, and I think Megan will do it beautifully, is, I've done a lot of work on menstruation in emergency context with displaced people, refugees, girls, women. We've launched this global agenda and have a new rec guidance document. And the argument we say is, how can a girl or woman stand in line to get her distributions? How can she go get water? How can she not be raped? How can she get through her day and take care of herself and her family if she doesn't understand the confidence to take care of herself and safe facilities that are accessible and not have to worry about it all the time and stay at home. So I think Megan will do better justice, but I think that's one of the ways, at least in the emergency world, we've tried to articulate it. For this question, and again, I'm sure Megan will speak to it, we have a long way to go. But one of the things that's happened in the last few years, I've been doing a lot of work with UNICEF, and now UNFPA and others are really taking on big leadership roles. And we started to think, okay, all these people are talking about this issue, and we have some excellent models of ways to respond in a given country, which certainly has lessons for other places. It's not only unique to Kenya. But one of the things we did a few years ago is create what we call MHM in 10, which is let's map out a 10-year strategy. We did it in 2014 with the goal of by 2024 transforming schools for girls around the world. We have this sort of vision around every girl having the information she needs, having the supplies, being able to access safe facilities. We sort of have a whole vision and 5 priorities that we brought together UN agencies and donors and NGOs and academics and social entrepreneurs and advocates and national governments. We have a long way to go even with that, because it's, again, as Megan said, there's not been a lot of funding. But really to try and push us all forward with a common goal about transforming schools for girls. And then there's all the other menstruation issues, which I won't get into, but I could talk about for days. But to speak to the other excellent question, so I similarly started to think about boys and the issues with boys, which is one of the reasons the puberty books that we develop and publish, which, again, speaking to Megan's great point, are developed through participatory activities with young people, having girls write stories about their first period, having boys write stories about wet dreams and erections and violence and peer pressure. And so we've done those books because we realized, and I'm sure Megan has stories of bullying and issues in these countries, where boys and men really need to know more and understand more, and frankly have their own questions. And one of the most telling things is when we collected some data after distributing our book, I think it was in Ghana, where we had girls, when I said, who else should read this book? And in the first 2 countries where we did the book, they said, all girls in the country, similar to the work Megan had been doing. And the response was, our fathers should read this book, and our mothers and our grandmothers. So they're not getting what they need and they're not feeling supported. And even in some countries like Ethiopia, we know sometimes girls get punished when people don't understand, they see blood and they think maybe they've been misbehaving and all sorts of things. To speak to the issue of boys, so first of all, I'm in public health, which is like 85% women. So there's not a lot of men in my classes. But I think I have come to appreciate there are very enlightened young men in my classrooms and a lot of men, similar to women, who are quite uncomfortable with the topic but are open to learning about it. And one of the things we've learned, particularly from doing the emergencies work, is that if you don't engage boys and men, you can't make girls' lives better, and frankly, you can't make boys' lives better. So one of the things we do in our books is have a page on menstruation. And so I think, and then the last thing I'll say is when we did our pilot of our emergencies toolkit in Kenya in refugee camps a year ago, we realized that the only way people would take us seriously, and it's just the reality, because we're dealing with a lot of engineers who focus on toilets in emergencies, and most of them are still male, the whole STEM effort, maybe that'll shift, that we needed a Kenyan water sanitation engineer to lead it. And then we had a Tanzanian woman who partnered with him, who took care of, sort of was the go-between with the girls and women. So it's amazing when he would walk into those meetings versus the women walking in, which is not a knock on men, but just to say the engineers want to talk to someone who speaks, we need to get there. But I do think I did that toolkit with a male engineer. That my main partner at UNICEF for years is a Turkish man who really just was so struck by this issue. So I think we have leaders coming from both places, even though it's still predominantly.
I'm going to look down at my notes, sorry. But so we in the West export largely like white men all over the world as sort of the role model in Hollywood, in all these different formats. And people read themselves into that person and they see themselves as the hero. So why can't boys read themselves into girls' stories and see themselves? And that's something that we're looking at as part of challenging social norms. And even in the US, we have kids of all ethnicities reading our magazines of these Kenyan girls and boys, because in our magazines there are tons of stories of boys and men. They're really intended to be read by both boys and girls, but they're girl-focused, and boys really respond to that. And I think that that's really important in some of those subtle ways in which we can address these types of issues. And we're also trying to go sort of macro culture, because as we've heard, it's a unifying issue. So instead of getting it into the Ma culture, the Kamba culture, being so specific, the magazines that we've done, girls in the Bronx love them, girls at Greenwich Academy love them, girls in Seattle love them. Because they say, I wish we had these things, it speaks to me. So these are universal issues, and I think it can actually, by creating these narratives in Kenya for the world, we can actually challenge a lot of things like racism and misogyny just in that way. So they are very inclusive to boys, and that's important. The need is huge, that's true. World Vision actually just wrote us into a grant to scale up to 10,000 boys and girls in urban Kenya, which we're hoping to hear about this month to start planning for January. And LVCT, which is this large international NGO in Kenya, they want to scale up to 25,000 girls in 4 counties next year. So big international NGOs are seeing what we're doing as a really scalable, smart solution. And World Vision even said to me, they said, Megan, we know how to raise the money, we just don't know how to do this type of programming as well as you guys do. So I said, great, well you guys can raise the money and we'll implement the programs. So next year we hope to scale to 25,000 through this one organization, 10,000 through this other one, and then ourselves to grow to about 20,000 to really focus in this area of Kalifi where we're doing this big study. So we're contributing to the data by doing this big 4-arm study to prove out our theory of change that pads plus this health education help measurably in specific ways that I can talk about later on health, education, and safety. And if anybody wants our baseline survey, Allison's card is in your packet, and we'd be happy to publicize our work. So, where we want to be in 3 to 5 years, we're serving 20,000 girls and women through the market right now with pads. By the end of next year, I'd like to be serving 200,000, and in 5 years, I'd like to be serving 2 million, which I think is realistic. And we want to serve 50,000 girls next year. I'd like to serve 500,000 through partners in the coming years, keeping ourselves small, but working through equipping small community-based organizations and big international NGOs with these resources. And then, I think that those are kind of the basic numbers that I'd like to see as success.
And one I know from my work, lucky enough to be around and spent my life around movement builders, and I remember last summer I was having lunch with the man who was the attorney for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I said, how did you know that you were building a movement? And he said, well, the first is how many people wish we weren't doing it. He said the second was how we were misunderstood. The third is people pointed out what we weren't doing. And he's like, they didn't pick that up and take up the part we weren't doing, they just kept saying what we didn't do. And he said, I don't think that people knew that you could have a movement across the globe, and it started in the south of the United States, and they misunderestimated us. And the philanthropists I've been lucky enough to work with who say to me, it's not where it's happening, it's that it's happening. And if that can then be a model for Eastern Europe, the Pacific Northwest of the United States, fill it in. But it's very easy, what I've learned from him and many other great movement builders, it's very easy for us to see what's lacking instead of seeing the untold possibility, and that it is growing and it's going to be something bigger and larger than the rest of us. And so what's starting in Kenya is happening in other places as well, but there's something happening in Kenya that is an opportunity for all of us. I do think eventually the global south and Africa will teach the United States how to do human rights well, and I'm hoping. But I think you go where great models are, and then you go from there. And that is my best belief, having done this for over 25 years and spent time alongside the people who built the movements that have made our world.
Can I ask something quickly to the question about abolishes,
and then
the argument of why this is the issue? We had a mother who came to us and said, my daughter used to spend the night out, we didn't know where she was. And now she's home every night, she's up at 4 a.m. to study, and she wants to be a lawyer. And that's what menstrual health, which is an inadequate term for what we do, is doing. Because for boys at the onset of puberty, their voice starts to be amplified, their opportunities start to be magnified. For a girl, they start to shrink. And what would the world look like if girls from the Bronx to Nairobi at that moment of puberty felt supported, felt their voice mattered, were starting to exercise their voice and knew their rights? In factory settings alone, it increases productivity by 3% factory outcomes, just having menstrual health management there. Our basic numbers said that every dollar invested in menstrual health yields $16 to society, and the unproven numbers are about like $45 to society. When you're just looking at pregnancy, HIV, et cetera, it's a huge impact. So imagine a world where girls believe they had a voice, believe that voice mattered, knew their rights and could exercise that voice and stay in school and decide when they're going to have a child, who they're going to have that child with. I mean, we have half the population of this world under about 20 right now. And imagine the possibilities of solving the future problems of this world if they're educated and safe and empowered. And that's really what we're trying to do, and we're just warming up.
Megan, thank you. And back to the inevitable.
First of all, thank you to all the panelists who were really wonderful, and thank you for illustrating how important this is. Thank you for all being here. I do want to say, for me, this is a family affair. I'm really happy to say my daughter Molly has invited a lot of her friends here tonight, and I'm really proud of that, and I want to thank you for being part of it. And when I talk to you about why this matters to me, I talk to you not only about the fact that it matters to me, but that it matters to me and my husband, Ken Nadomi, who's here, who shares a very important value of living a life of impact and demonstrating that because of something that we've done, that the world is a different or better place. And that is why I am so involved in this wonderful organization. A lot of people ask me why I dedicate my time and energy to a cause that is remote and where there are so many issues in our very own country. Why would I spend my time thinking about what's going on in Africa? So I want to share why and see if it resonates with you. First, I try to do my part for what's going on in this country and our city here in New York. And I do it in ways that fundamentally align around my passion for advancing women, whether it's women in the workplace or women's access to birth control and health resources that enable them to thrive. These are so important to me, and I spend so much of my free time with organizations that grow opportunities for women and girls. But for me, there's something about unleashing the work in Africa where the rate of change can be so quick and so significant. And you heard it on the panel tonight, it's about scale. And a little goes a long way, and a lot penetrates far and wide. To contribute to ZanaAfrica creates an outcome that is so fundamentally life-changing for these young girls. It's unbridled transformation, and I love that. But it's also that what happens there can echo back here. For all of our modern amenities in the US, we still have many regressive ways of thinking about women and our bodies. It was the voices of people in the menstrual health management movement across the world that helped bring down the tampon tax in New York City in 2016, saving women, particularly those with limited budgets, collectively millions of dollars. So there were women paying taxes for tampons, but there were people paying no tax on Rogaine. Explain that. Okay? For me, what I can do for an organization like ZanaAfrica makes a big difference to issues that I believe in and actions on the ground. And tonight, I hope you'll consider whether this is true for you, and if so, what you can do to support this incredible organization. So Kathy?
Whenever I have to follow up, so remember earlier, Linda said I run this little thing called Raising Change, and we do fundraising. Guess what I do? So what I'm lucky enough to do is mobilize resources and relationships to make the change we all know is possible. About 100 years ago, I was terrified of money. I was terrified. I didn't want to talk about it. I wanted to be near it. You know, I grew up food banks, food stamps, the whole 9 yards. I remember at one point walking in a room with people and thinking, you know, thank God I've got high cheekbones, because absolutely nobody knows how I grew up and what I came from. And then I remember a woman said to me, she said, I'm just so afraid you're all going to find out. And she said, well, why don't you tell them there's nothing left to discover? And then I got brave and told the truth about my life. And then I was actually able to be authentic with other people and say, I'm going to give every single cell in my being to support the values that I love and radically care about. And I wanted to see if you might want to do the same with me. And so I don't think you have to have money or come from money to be able to talk about how you mobilize passion and love for social change. And when I met Megan in that little town in Camden, Maine, and I thought, let's see if she emails me, and 2 years later she emailed me, and then I got to go and be there and see it and be with those girls, and I thought, they're all who I want to be someday. I'm much stronger than I ever was. And if I get to, for just a moment, do one thing that will have them know that they are known and seen, and that they are an asset and not a liability, and that they matter, and that I believe in my heart of hearts that it's women of color who will actually transform this world. And I just get to be a supporter and an ally in that. What an unbelievable gift that I get. And so I never ask people to give resources if I don't believe that's the right place for your money. I don't do it. Everybody on earth asks me to raise money for them. Let me be crystal clear, everybody. And I say no all the time. Because I have to know that this money is well spent and it's being put in the right place and that you can trust what's happening. And I've seen the work, and I know Megan, and I know her team, and I've met the girls, and I know this is the right place for the resources. So instead of spending any money that way, there's 2 laptops up there. And so one option is you get to go and make a gift, and you have my word. It will be well spent. You have my word. And the second is if you think, no, I want to give the money, but I actually want to be part of this. I want to do more. I want to be more involved. I want to be a part of what they're unleashing. 10 years is just the beginning. I've been around a bit now, and I know which groups are gonna soar, and this is one of them. So if you think I'd like to have a conversation in addition to a gift, please talk to Megan or the extraordinary Allison, who she's like, shoot, I was taking account. You can also talk to me, I'm here to talk to you. And I want to thank you. And just remember, there's a reason you came here tonight. And there's a reason you're at this talk tonight. And I think that reason is meaningful. And I'm so grateful that you joined us, and I'm so grateful to be in your presence. And I just think here's to the liberation of us all. Thank you so, so very much.